In this lesson, I'm going to give you 10 IELTS writing tips that every student should know before test day. These are simple things that can help you avoid common mistakes and boost your band score, especially if you're aiming for band 7 or higher. Now, by the way, if you want step-by-step training from a real IELTS expert, including full writing lessons, model answers, and strategies, make sure you check out our IELTS preparation course. You'll find the link in the description below. All right, let's jump into tip number 1, which is answer every part of the question. All right, so have a look at this writing task 2 question, and I'll show you what I mean. In many cities around the world, air pollution has become a serious problem. So this is the topic. It's telling you what the question is about. Now, underneath that, it tells you what you need to talk about. And it says, what are the main causes of this? And then it says, and what should governments do to solve the issue? So there are 2 parts for this question, causes and what should governments do to solve the issue. So if you want to get a high band score for task response, you need to talk about both the causes and what governments should do to solve the issue. Now, here's an example for task 1. I'm not going to read this part at the top. I'll just read this second part. It says, summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. So look what it says. You need to summarize the information. You also need to select and report on the main features. And finally, you need to make comparisons. So there are 2 main things you need to do. Talk about the main features, make comparisons, and your overall task is to summarize the information. So to get a high band score for task achievement, you need to do both of these things. Tip 2, paraphrase the question. Don't copy. Now, let's have a look at this writing task 2 question. Some people believe that university education should be free for everyone. To what extent do you agree with this statement? So this is a pretty simple question. You need to say how much you agree with this statement. Now, let's have a look at this introduction from a student. Some people think that. Some people believe that. University education should be free for everyone. Should be free for everyone. So as you can see, it's an exact copy of the question itself. And this is what you don't want to do. Now, after that, the student has some nice writing. She says, from my perspective, I argue that. That's no problem. But the big problem is she has copied the question word for word. So let's see if we can rewrite that together. So instead of saying some people believe, we could say something like it is argued by some. Now, instead of saying university education, we could say tertiary education. Sorry, my writing's a bit not very neat. Should be free for everyone. Well, we could say something like should be provided at no cost to everyone. So you can see here that the meaning is the same. We've just changed some of the words. But note here, we haven't changed every word. So for example, this one here, everyone. Well, we've said everyone right here. So you don't have to change every word. You just have to make sure that you don't copy. Tip 3, 1 main idea per paragraph. So have a look at this question in the corner here. It says, some people prefer to live in a big city while others enjoy living in the countryside. Discuss the advantages and the disadvantages of living in a big city. So you need to talk about the advantages and the disadvantages. Well, let's have a look at an example body paragraph from a student. Now, if you have a look at this paragraph, you see that at the very start, she says one advantage is that there are more job opportunities. That's fine, no problem. But then she continues and says, however, One disadvantage is that cities are crowded and noisy. So look what we're doing. We're mixing advantages and disadvantages in the same paragraph. And then if you keep reading, she gives another disadvantage. In addition, the cost of living in cities is usually higher. So this is a problem because if you have more than one topic in one paragraph, it may reduce your coherence and cohesion band score because it might make your writing a bit harder to read and follow because everything is just mixed together in one paragraph. So just remember the general rule is one topic in one paragraph. Tip 4, use different sentence types, simple and complex. So if you have a look at this body paragraph for writing task 1, which is on the screen now, you see that there are 3 sentences. And each sentence is slightly different in its structure. So let's quickly look at each sentence and talk about it. This first one, several modes of transport experienced a growth in numbers. Well, this is a simple sentence. Let me write that there. It's a simple sentence because there's one main idea. There's only one clause. Now, if we keep reading, the next sentence says, while the number of people taking the train increased slightly from 50,000 to 55,000, bus usage rose significantly from 40,000 daily users in 2000 to 100,000 in 2020. So you can see that with this one, we've got the word while. And because we have the word while, we have got an independent clause and a dependent clause. So this first bit here, while the number of that is a dependent clause because this part of the sentence needs the next part, which I'm highlighting in blue, to be a complete sentence. So this here is a complex sentence because we have a dependent clause and an independent clause. Now let's go on to the next one. It says car usage, which stood at 120,000 at the beginning, climbed steadily to 150,000 by the end of the period. So if you look at this here, where it says which stood at 120,000 in the beginning, well, this is called a relative clause. Now, this type of sentence here is also a complex sentence, but as you can see, it's got a slightly different structure from the one before it. So look what we got. We got a simple sentence here, a complex sentence here, and then a complex sentence here as well. So just remember, when you're writing, try to use a mix of both simple sentences and complex sentences. This is going to increase your grammar score because you're going to show the examiner that you have a wider range of grammar. Tip 5, use the passive voice. Many students don't use the passive voice in writing, and it's a very important part of grammar, and it's a very simple way to show the examiner that you have a wider range of vocabulary. So let's firstly look at an active voice sentence. As you can see, this first sentence, it says governments should build more public housing. So governments, that is the subject. Then we've got a verb, build, and then we've got the object. And with this sentence here, the government or governments are doing the action. The government is the thing that is building the public housing. Okay, this is an active sentence where the subject does the action. Okay, so the governments should be doing the action, which is building more public housing. Now, if we have a look at this sentence below, which is a passive voice sentence, so public housing, it's the subject now. We've still got a verb, and the verb is built. As you can see, we've changed the form of the verb, and then we've got governments. So you can see that the positions have been switched. So now governments is at the end. So with the passive voice sentence, this subject is receiving the action. Okay, it is not doing the action like with the active voice up here. Now, if you want, you could just remove this bit at the end and you could simply say more public housing should be built. That is fine. You don't need to say who should do the action, because with the passive voice, the action is the more important thing, and who is going to do it or what is going to do it isn't that important. So make sure you try to use some passive voice in your writing because it's going to improve your grammar score. Now, let me just quickly show you some passive voice examples. So here's the first one. Stricter environmental laws should be introduced by governments to tackle rising pollution levels. Here's another one. It can be argued that more funding is needed in the public education system. Now, this is a great phrase you can use when you want to give your opinion. You can simply say, it can be argued that, and then you give your opinion. Let's look at the last one. The issue of traffic congestion could be addressed by implementing stricter car ownership policies. So, as you can see with this last one, we've got the subject here, then we have the verb to be, and then we have our verb, which is verb 3. Tip 6, don't use informal language. All right, so have a look at this paragraph. As you'll see, there is a lot of informal, very casual language. So let's try and fix it together. Look at the first thing. It says a lot of people think. Well, we can get rid of that, and instead we can simply say many people believe. Okay, that is more professional, more formal. And then it says that the government should fix the environment. Or instead of saying something like fix the environment, we could say something like should address environmental issues. But it's not easy. Now, we could also make this a little bit more professional as well, but we'll just move on. There are tons of problems. Well, tons of, that's very informal. So instead of saying tons of, we could say something more professional like numerous challenges. Okay, that is much more professional. So there are numerous challenges, so we can get rid of this, like pollution and deforestation, and it costs a lot of money to deal with everything. So costs a lot of money is also quite informal and a little bit casual, so we can remove that and we can say something more professional like requires, okay, so needs, substantial funding. Okay, funding just means money. Or alternatively, you could say something like a substantial amount of financial resources. This is more professional and more formal. So just remember that when you're writing, try to make your writing more formal rather than informal or casual. Tip 7, avoid repeating the same word or words. So have a look at this writing task 1 body paragraph. Let's just quickly read it together and we'll talk about why there's a big problem. So the number of commuters increased in 2000. Okay, number of commuters. The number of commuters decreased in 2005. The number of commuters rose again in 2010. The number of commuters remained stable in 2015. So as you can see, we have repeated the number of commuters many, many times. And this is something that a lot of students get wrong and they don't know how to fix. So you can fix it in 2 main ways. You can use something called referencing, or you can use something called substitution. So let's quickly fix this paragraph together. So instead of saying the number of commuters in this second line, we could get rid of that. And we could just say something like but. So the number of commuters increased in 2000, maybe comma, but decreased in 2005. Now, note this is not perfect. This is not band 9 writing. I'm just trying to show you a very basic way to remove that repetition. Now let's look at that second sentence, which also has the number of commuters. So instead of saying that, we could remove this and we could say something like the figures. Okay, the figures just means the numbers or the data or the information. So the figures rose again in 2010. And again, we have got a number of commuters. So we can remove that again. So we could just say something like the figures rose again in 2010 and remained stable in 2015. So I hope you can see that it's normally quite simple to remove a repeated word or words. And like I said before, this is just a very basic example to show you what I mean. So just remember, try not to repeat the same words again and again. This is going to be a problem for two main reasons. The first reason is it might reduce your coherence and cohesion band score, and it also might reduce your vocabulary score because you're not showing the examiner that you have a wide range of vocabulary. Tip 8, don't use idioms. Idioms are more appropriate for spoken language, so it's best not to use them in written language. So let's quickly have a look at this body paragraph for writing task 2, which contains a few idioms, and we'll see if we can fix it. So it says, some people believe that starting a business is a great way to make money. So that's okay. It's not the best, it's not the most professional sentence in the world, but it's okay. But if you keep reading, it says they think it's the best way to get ahead in life. This is sort of like an idiom. So instead of saying get ahead in life, we could say something like they think it's the most effective way to become successful. So instead of saying get ahead in life, we're saying to become more successful. Now let's keep reading. However, running a business is not always easy and can sometimes cost an arm and a leg. So if something costs an arm and a leg, it is very expensive. So instead of saying that, we could say something like, and can sometimes be extremely expensive. Now, that's a very basic way to say that. We could say something more professional, like it sometimes requires a lot of financial resources. So please note the way I have fixed these two idioms is just very basic, and you could definitely make it better. The key thing to remember is that generally for writing, you shouldn't be using idioms because they're more suitable for spoken language. Idioms are quite informal. Tip 9, don't just list ideas. So we've had a look at this question already, which you can see in the corner here, the bottom right-hand corner. So let's have a look at a body paragraph which a student has written. Have a look at the first sentence. It says, living in a big city has many drawbacks. Well, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's just the topic sentence. But if you keep reading, that's when you start to see the problem. There is often a high level of noise. Okay, that's just one idea. That's one of the drawbacks or disadvantages. The air quality is usually poor. Okay, that's another disadvantage. Traffic jams are common. Okay, that's another disadvantage. The cost of living in urban areas is generally much higher. Okay, that's another main idea. If you keep reading, it says many people in big cities seem rushed and unfriendly. And then finally, there is often a lack of green spaces for relaxation. So you can see here that there are just lots of ideas and no topic development. And to get a high band score for writing task 2, task response, you need to support your answers. You need to develop your answers. So instead of just listing, it's better to have one or two main ideas and then give more information about those ideas. So maybe you could give an example. You could talk about an effect. It doesn't matter. The most important thing is that you don't just list your ideas. You need to support them. You need to develop them. Tip 10, keep it simple and clear. All right, so let's have a look at this very long sentence. Many people argue that governments should invest more in public transport to reduce traffic congestion and pollution in cities, which have become major issues due to the increasing number of private vehicles on the road, especially during peak hours, and this makes it difficult for people to commute. As you can see, this is a very long sentence with a lot of ideas. It would be much better if the student wrote this again and separated it into 2 or even 3 sentences. So let's have a look at a more simple and clear example now. It can be argued that governments should allocate more funding to public transportation. Look at that. Very, very simple. It's very easy to understand, and there's not too much information in this sentence. This may reduce traffic congestion, and air pollution, which are both worsening as more commuters choose to drive private cars. So again, this sentence is much better. It's easier to follow. It's still a bit long, but it's clearly separated into 2 parts, and it's much easier to follow than this very complicated sentence at the top here. So a lot of the time, simple writing is much better than very complicated, fancy writing that is trying to impress the examiner. So when you're writing, make sure you keep it simple, but at the same time, still use higher level vocabulary and grammar. So if we go back to this simple and clear sentence or sentences, you can see that there is some high level vocabulary. For example, we've got allocate, we've got funding, we've got congestion, commuters, worsening. So it's not that if you write in a simple way that your writing will be at a lower level. No, that's not true. What I'm trying to say is don't write like this, where you try to put everything into one sentence. No, a lot of the time it's much better to write like this in a simple and clear way, but at the same time, still remember to use that less common vocabulary and different grammar structures. Now, if you want to know 40 words that you should not be using in IELTS writing, check out this video right here. Thanks for watching, take care, and all the best with your studies.